Hello, and welcome to my winter reading wrap up. In this video, we're going to go over the 16 books I read from January to March this year, and I'm going to talk about my thoughts and how I felt reading all of them. But before we get into all the books, I want to talk about how I consumed these books. I read 8 physical books, 4 digitally, so via my Kindle, and then I listened to 4 audiobooks. So let's just get right into all the books and my rankings. Okay, so the first book I read and finished this year was The Last Graduate, which is the second book in the Scholomance series. The Scholomance series is basically a play on like a magic school like Harry Potter, but the idea is that our wizard students or our magical students are physically like being attacked by the school and these creatures that are basically like drawn to magic and drawn to power. The Last Graduate is our second book in the trilogy, and I rated it 4 stars. I think that this was a phenomenal book. I'm not joking. When I finished it, my partner found me in tears on my bed because of how emotional this book made me feel. It was really a great way to end like the school part of the series. Our third book looks at basically life beyond graduation, and I really enjoyed the way that we encountered the school and how we dealt with it. The second book I read this year was The Wager, which I rated 3 stars. I listened to this on audiobook, so I don't have a physical copy, but it is basically about this ship in very early 1700s, I want to say, maybe 1800s, and the men commit mutiny and basically disagree with how the captain does things. But then later on, the captain is found and there's like a trial, and it's just a very complicated situation. I picked this up because it was pretty much like everywhere in bookstores, but it really wasn't the type of book I would normally pick up. I'm not very drawn to history in that specific way, but I do think it was like a good depiction. It's just not a book that was for me, which is why I only gave it 3 stars. The third book I read and finished this year was The Golden Enclaves, which is the third book in the Scholomance series, and I rated this 3 stars. The Golden Enclaves basically centers on what's going to happen after graduation, and we leave book 2 on a cliffhanger, so there's a lot of problems going into book 3, but there was a lot of things that happened in this book that I really did not feel super good about. Our main character is in a relatively romantic relationship with another character that's in books 1 and 2, and their relationship is not strictly defined, but in book 3, she engages in romantic activity with another character, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I really felt some type of way about it. I hope that that is not too spoilery, but that is something to be aware of when you go into book 3. I also felt like book 2 was almost like a stronger conclusion for the series than book 3, and I think like how necessary was book 3, to be completely honest. So that was kind of how I felt about it. Not my favorite, but I do really think the Scholomance series in general is a really great book series if you enjoy like that magic school environment and like kind of a play on Harry Potter. So yeah. The next book I have for you is The Sword of Kaigan, which I do not own physically as I listen to it on audiobook. The Sword of Kaigan is basically about a small town where they really follow like traditional warrior culture, and there are a lot of like traditional social norms that feel very dated to our reality, like the way women are presented in the world of very much being homemakers and not really having a say. Their husband like kind of controls everything and does all the work, and they're really just expected to raise their children and like be in the household and maintain that part of life. But what happens in the book is we follow a mother and her son as war looms on the horizon, and we know that the mother has a history of being a warrior prior to her being a homemaker. So, as war looms on the horizon, it becomes very clear that she cannot hide that part of her life and just be a homemaker. She needs to deal with this right now. And I rated this book 5 stars. It is an incredible book. It is one of the best standalone fantasies I've ever read in my entire life. It is so wonderful. I felt so attached to the mother character in particular, and I cannot believe we don't get another story with her. That being said, if you read this and enjoy it, there is books in this universe. It just does not follow her as a specific character. But she is so wonderful, and the way she views the world and like handles problems is so fascinating. So I really enjoyed this one. I mentioned this in the books I want to buy video because I want to own it so bad because it's such a wonderful book. After finishing Sword of Kaigen, I then read Us Against You on my Kindle, which is the second book in the Beartown series. In Us Against You, we are basically looking at the town as they are continually dealing with the problems that happened after a character committed an act of violence against a woman in book one. And it just is continuing what the town is dealing with and how they are handling this. And the character who committed the act of violence in book one was a hockey player, and it's a hockey town. It's just a very complicated situation. And we really are just getting like a depiction of how bad things affect everyone in a town's life, especially a small town where people are so interconnected and everything feels very personal to them. I thought it was so great. It was a 5-star book for me, and I really love the Beartown trilogy in general. All the characters feel so real, and the writing style is really wonderful. And I'm so excited to read the winners. I also really would love to read some of Frederick Bachman's other works, like Anxious People or A Man Called Ove. So definitely one of those authors where I'm just like consuming everything that he has to write. The next book I have for you is The Book That Broke the World, which is the second book in the Book That Wouldn't Burn series. I rated The Book That Broke the World 3.5 stars. I thought it was a really interesting book, but I had a very difficult time with it at first because we follow different characters at the beginning of The Book That Broke the World than the characters that are in The Book That Wouldn't Burn. And I found that really, really challenging to feel engaged because I'm looking to see what happened to these characters I care about in the Book That Wouldn't Burn series. So that was why I kind of lowered the rating. But I think it's a really interesting series and I would love to read more. If you're curious about this series, it's about a like infinite library where there is just books on like every single topic, but it's also like a maze and confusing. But there's also this like war between humans and another race, and there's just like a lot of political things as well happening. And it's just a really interesting series. It feels very Wild West meets library because we're looking at like a desert city and desert town. So, very interesting, but yeah, it was just hard to get into it at first. After reading that, I read Gideon the Ninth, which I rated 3 stars. I think that this is a really amazing concept for a book series. Gideon the Ninth and the Gideon the Ninth series follows a necromancer society where there are multiple houses of necromancers, but they also each have like a swordswoman or a swords person who takes care of them and helps protect them. And we follow Gideon, who is not actually traditionally in the role of helping our necromancer or being like the right hand man to the necromancer. She is actually trying to escape the necromancer at the very beginning of the book. But due to some circumstances, she has to be with her through these trials to become basically the next like super powerful necromancer. And it is a really fun concept for a book. My issue with it is that there are so many characters in this book, it is almost too much to handle. When we get to the trial, there is so many people to keep track of, and I had a hard time feeling connected to every single character, and it felt like it was the type of situation where every single character is relevant. Like you needed every single character to understand what was going on. So that was why I rated it lower, but I am going to continue on with this series because I think we'll see a little less of that in the next books. So yeah, that was what I had a hard time with. But I did love the main character of Gideon, and I loved Harrowhark, so I'm excited to see what happens in the rest of the series. The next book I have for you is Legendborn, which follows an Arthurian secret society that does magic at the University of North Carolina, and I ranked this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book. It's very bingeable, so if you've been in a reading slump or just really want something fast paced, I think that this is a really enjoyable pick for you. The only other thing I would caution you is there is a love triangle, and I know for some people that is like a red flag and they don't love a love triangle book, but let me tell you, I kind of ate it up. So I think it's a well done love triangle and it's very interesting. And you can tell that I was really in love with this book because immediately after I finished it, I read the second book in the series, Bloodmarked, on my Kindle, which I rated 3.5 stars. Bloodmarked basically just continues the story onward as we have our main character encounter basically more difficulties and more of like the politics of a secret society rather than the like magical parts of secret society. And I thought it was really, really fascinating. And I've been like dying to read Oathbound. I have it on hold for my library and I cannot wait to pick it up. But who knows when that will be because it's a new release. It came out at the beginning of March. So it might be a bit, but I am so excited to finish the series because it is just so addicting and so fun to read. After that, I then read Howl's Moving Castle, which I rated 4 stars. I thought that this was a brilliant book, and it's really fun to see the differences between the Studio Ghibli movie and this book. Howl's Moving Castle, if you're unfamiliar, is basically about this wizard Howl who has a magically moving castle, and this girl Sophie who is cursed to be old, who moves into Howl's castle and is trying to figure out a cure to her curse in this time. And it is a really sweet, wholesome book. I believe that the book is young adult. The movie is clearly targeted mainly toward like children or young adult as well. It was really interesting. The biggest difference I would say between the movie and the book is that the book has a lot more build up in terms of Howl's and Sophie's relationship. I've always felt like the movie feels like it moves really fast with Howl and Sophie, which is fine, but I felt like we got a much more long-term build up from the book, so I enjoyed seeing that. And it was really fun. I would love to read more Studio Ghibli books. I've read Kiki's Delivery Service, but I think that most of them have a book written prior to the movie or like after the movie. So I would love to pick up a few more of those and see how I think about the other Studio Ghibli books. I then read The Gathering on my Kindle and I rated this 3 stars. The Gathering is a book about vampires in Alaska, basically, and it is about a detective who is trying to investigate a murder that the town believes was done by vampires. And in this world, vampires are like a protected group, and because mainly vampires like consume animal blood and do not kill humans for the most part, they are like kind of not allowed to be messed with or tampered with. But if a vampire attacks a human, then they sometimes will organize a cull, which means that they kill all the vampires in the area. And this small town wants them to kill all the vampires in the area because they feel unsafe and they're like very traditional, and in the past like hunting vampires was part of life, and it was a fascinating concept for a book. I eat up any type of vampire book. I think it is such a fun idea, and I think vampires are like one of the most fascinating monsters we have in a lot of like lore or like traditional magic when we talk about different monsters that are like repeated across books and media. And I thought it was really fun. I think my only like kind of gripe with the book is it sometimes felt like we were going with like the easiest route with things. Like some of the plot twists were not that crazy, and I have a hard time with thriller books in general. I tend to like be looking for something that is not found in most thriller books. Like I think there's always a plot twist, but sometimes I'm like, okay, like we could have been more interesting with this plot twist. But I thought it was fun. I think they might continue this series because it does kind of leave it open at the end to where they could continue it. And I would love to pick up more of these books if they do. I then read The Ministry of Time, which was the last physical book I read so far this year. I rated The Ministry of Time 5 stars. The Ministry of Time basically is about a world where time travel is real and has been discovered. But what they are doing is they are kind of testing the limits of time travel. So they've brought back people from the past who would have otherwise died, and they are introducing them to modern society. But they've each been assigned like a bridge person who is helping them adjust to things in the modern day. And we follow a person who is a bridge and their relationship with their assigned person who is from the past. And they develop a very intimate relationship, and there's a lot of like slice of life to it. and I just thought it was so sweet, and I felt so enamored with these characters and this world, and I would love, like, more books in this world. I don't think we will get any, but it was just very, very sweet. There is a little bit of a romance element to it, but it is a very, like, literary type romance. We don't get all the, like, beats of a traditional romance, and I really, really enjoyed it. I definitely would recommend this one. The next book I have for you is the Game of Thrones, which I rated 4 stars. I listened to the Game of Thrones on audiobook because one, I thought it would be a little easier, and two, this is like one of the most highly ranked audiobooks ever. Like, I know this narrator is beloved. Moving on to my thoughts about Game of Thrones, I thought this was such an interesting series to read now. I know that, like, the Game of Thrones series or the Song of Ice and Fire is one of the most hyped up fantasy series ever. So, like, kind of participating in that hype when I've never really consumed anything Game of Thrones other than what I've, like, forcibly consumed by seeing on social media. Like, I know, for example, that people hate King Joffrey, but I only know that from, like, being a bystander to watching people watching the show all these years ago. But I really thought it was a interesting book. It was much more political than I think I was aware of going in. The first book, at least, really is about the politics, and it's about, like, trying to play games to get power and who is in power and, like, who has control. And I thought that was very interesting. I also thought that we got really good character development for all the characters. I didn't know how much of that we would get or if it would be very plot focused, but all the characters felt very well developed and I understood all their motives, and even the characters who I would not like or that felt like kind of evil, I could at least understand what was happening to lead them to those decisions and motivations. So I'm really excited to read the second book. I did take, like, a short break between them because it's a lot. Like, reading it is a lot. I sometimes would have to check, like, the wiki to see, like, wait, did I miss something? Like, I feel like I don't fully understand what's going on. And because there's, like, a million characters, I was like, wait, who is this again? But I am really excited to get into the rest of the series. I think that book two should, like, really kind of kick off in a crazy way. So I'm looking forward to continuing Game of Thrones. I then read The Priory of the Orange Tree on my Kindle and I rated this 5 stars. I loved this book. This is a phenomenal standalone. I guess it's not truly standalone anymore because there was a prequel made, but I know when it originally came out, it was a standalone fantasy book. And the book series is about a queendom where there is no heir, and the reason that's a problem is because there's, like, a belief that this queendom continuing protects the world from dragons coming to attack them. I know that sounds a little crazy, but trust me, that's what it is. And then at the same time, we're also getting perspectives from dragon riders and outsiders to the court and just, like, a bunch of different parts of this world. And I thought it was so fascinating. All the characters were so lovable, or at least I could understand why they acted the way they did. And I just was so invested in everything that was happening. It felt like it was just constantly like go, 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 go. And it was also really interesting how the book could, like, change from feeling like, okay, we're telling this type of story to, like, 100 pages later, like, oh no, this, I had no idea this is a totally different type of story. And it could almost feel like I'm reading a different book than, like, this other part of the world, but in a way that still made sense. Like, it didn't feel like different writing style. It was just such a different reality to the one that we were living in a certain part of the world versus another part. So I really, really enjoyed Priory of the Orange Tree. I have Day of Fallen Night at hold on my library, so I cannot wait to pick that one up. Though I am sad because we probably won't get the characters from Priory. We'll get different characters, but I still want to be back in this world, so it's totally okay. The final book I have for you is American Teenager: How 8 Trans Kids Are Surviving Hate and Finding Joy in a Turbulent Age. Wow, that is a mouthful. And I rated this 4.5 stars. I listened to this on audio, which was a really interesting audiobook because the narrator kind of tried to give accents or, like, different vibes for each part of America we were in, which I thought was a bit much, but I did really enjoy the book anyway. My big gripe and the reason I brought it down from 5 stars and have it at 4.5 is because our character or our teen that we follow in Chicago, Illinois, does not live in Chicago. And as someone who lives in Chicago, I find that incredibly frustrating. The teenager clearly lived in some sort of suburb, and I was like, can we just say Illinois or say some other city? And I get that like Chicago is the famous city in Illinois, so you want to depict it that way, but I found that so incredibly frustrating as someone who lives in Chicago. I know that's like so nitpicky, but something that totally would drive me in particular insane. But I thought that in general, this was a very good depiction on what transgender life must be like for a teenager right now. The reality is like most of it is just teenagers being teenagers. They all kind of had like different ambitions and goals and just wanted to live like being a young teen and being able to live life and have dreams just like any cisgender person would have. So I thought it was a great book, despite that little gripe I have with it. But I really enjoyed it. So definitely one that would be worthwhile to pick up. I think it only came out like last year, so it's definitely relatively new and current to what is currently happening, although it was written prior to the election, so there's some things that are a little out of date, but it tries to keep as current as possible. Those are all the books I have for you. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments what books you read this winter and maybe what one of your favorites was, as well as what are you planning to read this spring. If you do a spring TBR, I would love to know. If not, just maybe some of the books you're excited to read coming up. And also, I would love if you like, comment, and subscribe to support my channel and support the work I'm doing. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!